Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, you can call me Xanthi, and today's episode is based on minutes 116 through 120 of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. In this set of minutes, Snoke's lower half falls from his throne with a thud, Kylo force chokes Hux, and the Resistance starts setting up on Crait, the salt planet and former rebel outpost. My guest today is Chris Radtke, otherwise known as Radtke, and a Star Wars Minute VIP, whom I'm very excited to talk about, and is much funnier than
Hello.
me. Hello,
Stop.
hello, Radtke.
It's so great to be here. I love The Last Jedi so much, and I will take any opportunity I can to talk about this wonderful film. So, yeah,
Something,
I got a question for you.
sure.
Where does it fit for you
I
in
don't
the?
rank. I don't rank Star Wars movies.
I can't.
Like no, I feel like very strongly about it. I feel strongly about not ranking them because none of no Star Wars film can exist like without the ones that came before it. So it's like not even a it's not even a fair comparison after a certain amount of movies for me, unless I'm like, I don't know, evaluating them from the cool lens of a film critic, which I'm not because I'm a Star Wars fan. And even if I try to, I can't separate that. So I see it as like one big history, and each film is like another installment of the encyclopedia. And because here's the thing, when I judge which Star Wars films I like the most, it's like, what am I talking about? Am I talking about the filmmaking, or am I talking about like which era, which stories that they're talking about? You know, like I love the prequel era. Like I love the
Oh, I
prequels.
know.
I love the prequels, and I'm not going to debate someone about the merits of the film because either way, like you could have probably made a film anyway. But I just like that era so much, so I like being in that time and with those characters. Do you see what I'm saying?
Very much so. I think that is that's pretty good way to think about it. And I think, I tend to I'll debate in my head, I'll rank and things and that stuff, but I also feel because it's more than just films at this point, and I'm very much stickler for canon, right? But and I do like, I'm very much like the Disney era in that, I like the comics and I like, the TV shows and things like that. So it's now become more and more like it's more, it's not as linear. And I think that, I see where you're coming from. I will still probably rank movies, but I find myself now and I'm like, well, where do I put Mando? And that gets,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
then my brain falls out. So um, but anyway, let's talk about Snoke's half.
Oh my gosh, it falls with such a thud.
So great.
And like from the sound of his thud, you can tell that like, I mean, his body is very heavy and dense. You know,
Hmm.
it sounds like, I mean, the sound it makes is it's like one sound.
Well, and it's also, I think what's interesting about it too is when you think about Snoke's role in this and that thud, um, it's such a there's two ways I look at it. It's or listen to it. One is it's this thud that is final, but it's also almost anticlimactic, and it feels like, here's this character who's this, in theory, there's the emperor, he's the boss, but he's just gone out like a punk, and that thud is just like dunk, it's over. And then like immediately after this, where it's like, you know the reaction that Kylo Ren has after is so like, yeah, that's the past, this is now. And I think that the finality of that thunk really, is an audio cue for what's going to happen. But also the other way to think about it too is just, I think and I think, and I don't know if it's intended this way, but when you look at now the whole collected picture, and that Snoke was just this, like, he was a puppet. He was, that there's that funk also kind of signifies that, like, he was inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. He was just a tool, a means to an end. So I mean, it's really
I like
cool
that.
that these things, and the sound design really, gives you that feel, and you don't even realize that you're getting that feeling.
Absolutely. I really like what you said there. The thud it's almost humorous. It's like, oh, that's it.
It is. It's like it is. I mean, I when I was watching the clip that you had sent over, and I literally like I lolled. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
boom, and like, oh my
It's like,
god, so
oh,
good.
I guess that's not like a very dignified, like, I
Yeah,
don't know. He didn't like force float. Like, there's nothing
it,
ceremonious about it. It's just like,
nope,
oh yeah, just like the wreckage of his body. Just
yeah,
away.
it's done. Okay, moving on. Next, um,
That's
and
really
then
funny.
and then I think as their world is crumbling around them, and here that his Snoke's two surrogate sons that he's kind of pitted against each other. You then have them like, and they're bickering, and this and just Hux, I love you, man, but you ain't gonna
He
win that fight,
he
dude.
reaches for his weapon
It's so great. I love.
really slowly, and then Kylo moves, and he's like, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, Hux is so good in this movie. I really like. I thought, just as a you know, they took what was essentially what I felt a bit of a one note kind of character, and you know gave him he's kind of dopey, and he's kind of like he's just there's not very self-aware, and um
Yeah, you're so right. Like the First Order and Imperials, they really do come off sort of as one note, like after a while.
yeah,
And Hux could have been just another, just another random random one that they put in there.
exactly.
But I think this film made him into something more, which, some people did not like. And, I guess whenever you take a stand on something, um, you're just going to have more polarizing opinions either way. And I just appreciated that Hux was something different.
Yeah, I do, I did like that. Now actually, so here's another thing, especially you being someone who is very attuned to sound. um Adam Driver's voice is so deep and so dense. So like when and like I haven't watched Last Jedi in a while. I haven't watched any of the sequel trilogies. I mean, the last time I watched one was when Rise of Skywalker came out, and so I haven't heard Adam Driver's voice in a long time. And then like so watching that clip and then hearing him, just that deep for I mean, it's so amazing, and he's so like, and it's really natural, and it's really cool to compare his voice to James Earl Jones's voice. um,
Oh,
I think they have that similar um, just natural
the
depth.
gravel in the bottom end of it.
Yeah, and when when he's like, supreme leader is dead, and like I wonder if they tweak his audio, like
Well, they do. They do. There's significant dialogue mixing, of course,
right.
but I would be curious. I mean, I would guess if I were mixing his dialogue, not really knowing how Adam Driver's voice sounds like. I mean, I should probably listen to interviews, but um,
Very high pitched.
I mean, I'm sure it's not high pitched, but but within someone's natural range, you can boost certain frequencies so that are already naturally occurring. So you can emphasize his low end, which I'm sure they probably did,
Right, right,
and cut out high end. You can do like a high cut filter to cut high end and like things like that. And I do know that they meticulously, like someone meticulously went through and took out like extra breaths and extra like mouth sounds and like all
right.
those things.
It's so
Um,
cleaned up.
it's so, I mean, the dialogue mixing is really, really good. And
Yeah,
it helps, like, the thing that helps the most is to just have actors who naturally can do a good performance,
right. And I
to
think,
have
and
less to edit. Yeah.
right, and what's really neat is I also feel that his voice matches his physicality.
hmm
Um, so like,
Yeah. Oh, and his physicality in this scene is so distinct, like the way that he like lumbers off
yeah, oh my
off
god,
frame.
I love, and like, um, I I've grown to, like I do feel he is hands down my favorite thing of the sequel trilogies. Like his performance. Um, I'm I'm very critical of the JJ movies, but the one thing I always say is JJ can cast. He's really good at casting, and Adam Driver just his like he's a giant of a man. His features are exaggerated, and then he's got this voice. I mean, like it's and then he looks like Han Solo from the holiday special cartoon. So like he's got
Huh.
he has that, and that voice really, it's amazing. And it is an iconic voice, like a Darth Vader and like a Yoda and like a Jabba, and all three of those characters are, very manipulated puppets slash, modulation, right? So here's an actual human being having a voice that matches that of, the fantastical of Star Wars.
It's
Um,
really it's really hard to come by, I think, increasingly, like when subtle performances are sort of more of the style increasingly. Because with film you can get so much finer detail, and musically also things like textures and all those things are more in vogue at the moment. But sort of the presence of a stage actor
right.
is something that he certainly has. And I think a lot of Star Wars characters do, which is whenever I like watch behind the scenes stuff and I watch the actors, like, oh my gosh, to watch like Anthony Daniels and to watch the
Right.
actors out of their like ridiculous costumes doing their thing, suddenly when you see it coming out of a human, you're like, whoa,
What is that?
that is wow. It like makes sense when it's coming out of like a gold thing, but
Well, I was
wow,
watching
amazing.
there. It was funny because there was a promotional video for Bad Batch recently that had
D.
what's
Bradley Baker with all the voices.
it's so funny. I was cracking up. Um, and it's all variations of that, New Zealand accent. And then you have Omega in there. So it's really, it was so like hearing him do those voices, all of them was just hysterical and amazing. And him
Yeah.
talking through like each, the nuance he gives to each one of them. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
I agree. And I found it fascinating talking to Anthony Hansen a while ago, who voiced Luke Skywalker in the first Battlefront game. And he was sort of talking about the nuances in making different voices. And it's a sound thing that we forget about sometimes as being part of sound design and being part of like the sonic landscape, but is very important and is something the sound designers really take into account when they're crafting, the sound effects and everything.
Right.
And specifically in The Last Jedi, the sound designers had a lot of time to work, which is unusual. Like they said that they finished this film like way earlier than they normally would be. And they were able to just go into scenes that already had music, like already all that was already done. They were able to go into scenes and find like which frequency ranges were available basically to them,
Oh,
and
interesting.
be able to craft things that fit, and things where they had to maybe let the dialogue shine more, because a lot of the sound design game and the not just sound design but the overall mixing of all of the tracks, which there are tons of tracks, the mixing of all of the tracks, a lot of it just comes down to like separating the frequencies so that not all of your sounds are in the same bass range, because then you don't hear any of them with clarity. So if you
Hmm.
have a lot of things that are like low pitched, then you're gonna put in chimes like the vulptices or something
Right.
like
Right.
something higher to cut through. And if you have just like high pitched vocals, then you might put something lower because that will be available to you.
Right. Fascinating. That's really interesting because, like, when as you're talking about that, um, one of the things that it was last night. I was poking around on the iPad, and I'm like, oh, they just put droids on Disney Plus, and I haven't watched that since, like I watched that when it was on, like airing,
I've never seen it.
it's terrible. But I will tell you, the theme song is amazing. The theme song is by Stuart Copeland from The Police. and it's just a really cool pop song, and it's really great. So like I highly recommend it. At the very least, just watch the
I
intro.
definitely, I mean, I do plan to watch them all, no matter
They're not
what. Just
they're but the reason why I brought them up is so I'm watching this episode, and I had to kind of I got halfway through. I'm like, okay, this is not where my head's at right now. But the sound design, an '80s cartoon is very different than what you're used to today, right? So I do find going back and looking at a lot of that vintage, watching some of that vintage stuff, especially like combing through Disney Plus with a lot of the old Marvel stuff that's in there. Um, you don't realize until you have a comparison about the advances in sound, right? So for instance, I'm watching Droids, it's Anthony Daniels doing his voices, but there's all these weird pauses, and it's just you can't to compare that to The Last Jedi, right? Like it's not apples to apples, but the sound took me out, and that was kind of a weird thing where it's because like I'm listening to C-3PO talk, and because he's not being mixed the same way that they would in a theatrical film, it's a cartoon, and back then the cartoons weren't like what like you wouldn't get what they're doing with D. Bradley Baker now. You hear 3PO's voice, but there's something different. It's something, and it's
I'm really
not like a,
curious.
yeah, you're gonna go in there, you're gonna be like, wow, that's interesting, because like there's the and it's not the same reaction when you hear a different someone doing the voice for a character that is portrayed by a different actor in theatrical, but like it is Anthony Daniels, and he sounds off, and I think that is you talking about how these things are kind of makes me realize, I'm like, oh yeah, because they don't have the budget to do it the way they would for in a movie. um
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
like
fascinating.
it sounds more like just Anthony Daniels talking as opposed to him being
Sort
C-3PO.
of like an audio drama
Yes, totally.
vibes.
Absolutely, he was pulling off the radio drama
Yeah.
from oh my god, I love that. Like I listened to that quite a bit going to bed. um but yeah,
I
this
also haven't heard that, but I should. I just listened to the Dooku Jedi Lost audio drama, and that was entertaining. So now I'm
go
interested in
back
more.
and listen to the original Star Wars radio show. If you could find it, it's out there. Like I used to listen to, like I need to listen to things when I go to sleep, so that was a really good one to go, because it's fun, it's actually pretty good. um for at the time, again, dating myself, like I when these things happened, I remember um they were big events, and you only had one shot, right? Like you could listen once, or you could the holiday special was airing once, and um and it was, now that it's on demand, it's interesting to go back and kind of dig into that stuff. And um oh my
I
god,
definitely will, and I'm excited to do so. Uh, it's
but
going to be
back to The
so
Last
different from,
Jedi.
yeah, back to The Last Jedi. So, okay, so we get the Force choke, and which is there's an amazing sound there. Also, it's like the absent, like the sound gets sucked out. It's sort of
Yeah,
the all the telekinesis sounds are just really
yeah,
phenomenal. We get Kylo Ren's theme, of course, doo, 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 and then the Supreme Leader is dead. Long live the Supreme Leader, choking. And
so
then
good.
we get this wide shot, like from Crait, or we see Crait from space, and then we see the surface of Crait. So we're like kind of going closer and closer, but all of them, these are like big, wide shots. We see the vast expanse of rock. Um, and then we get that shot of Leia peering out from the open door, and there's like that corona of light. And then we get the close up on Leia's eyes looking out from that cloak. And the wind is howling. It's like spacious.
Yeah, and it's giving you, and it's giving you this sense of place that is
Yes.
um you know the sound portrays the abandonment of the salt world, and
Yes.
and it is like, and it's, what's interesting is you also have, it's Leia returning to a place that we haven't seen her at before, but we know kind of storyline wise that she's been here before, what it means. um but there is this kind of weird like abandonment feeling they captured, I thought, really nicely.
That's true. Because it was a former rebel base, and Leia's parents used to, do stuff there. And I mean, yeah, I hadn't really thought of it that way, even though the expansiveness of it and the sort of the abandonment of it pretty characterizes that planet. Also, the fact that they're on watch and sort of waiting to hear something, it
Yeah.
makes sense to have the absence there. But I find it interesting that um, the really wide shots of these sort of new places that we see in this film, Ahch-To and this, are introduced in such different ways. On Ahch-To, it's introduced with like the big orchestral score. It's like the Jedi
Right.
Steps theme. It's like
Yeah.
this beautiful, luscious
Earthy.
music.
Yeah.
And
Like
here
you're in a
it's like,
jungle.
and here it's the sound design introduces you, and it's like the howling wind, and it's,
Well, what's cool too is if you think it all rhymes, man. When you go back to how this thing ties in, where the you know the threads of empire
I was
come,
just thinking of Hoth.
right? So like, and that's that same shot with the through the binoculars. I forgot
Quadnoculars.
the quadnoc. Thank you very much, nerd. So the quadnoculars, and it's that, and it has that same kind of quiet before you start seeing the walkers come, right? So this evokes that whole kind of feeling of just it's quiet, the pause, the calm before the storm, and then and then it's the panic and the like, oh my god, and sure, the music swells, but it's more about the voices that you're hearing of people like like freaking out while these giant machines are coming to step on them.
Totally. And here, like, first we get the hint of the TIE fighter sounds, which are, like the elephants.
Right.
And then we hear like the vulptices, their little jingle. Um,
Yes.
and
I love their their
jingle jangle.
dusted, yeah, they're gem dusted jingles that they like
Me
that
too.
they
The canon explanation is that it's like how they warn each other that stuff's happening.
right, exactly. Like
Um,
wind chimes, trouble.
but shout out
Um,
to Margie O'Malley and Ronnie Brown, sound or like Foley artists, for coming up with that. Um, and then incoming, incoming, there's
right,
a, you know, for not only first order, but then a shuttle crashes into the little room as they're closing the door. They start shooting, but it is Finn and Rose.
right. Let's go. And it's such
And
a,
it's funny. They're like, wait, don't shoot.
yeah, and it's I loved, I really liked this setting too. I thought was neat was the, you get a good sense of place with, like, they're in a big mountain, right? And so you've got what's happening outside that big door. And even though it's like, it's a plot point, like, we'll just go through the secret tunnels, come this way, but like there, that cavernous, like, and it has a feel of the echo base, right? So there's that, it almost feels like this is the abandoned Hoth base. And what was it when I was watching the clip too and thinking about the connections, you know like, there's also an abandoned rebel base on Hoth, and there's abandoned rebel bases, and like, as just like a theme, it'd be just interesting. Like, do I want to see Mando go show up at the Hoth base? No, but just thinking about like what's in there, like the family of Wampas in there now, or like what's
Yeah.
what's going on in there? What are they doing out back on Hoth? So it gave me that sense that, like, oh yeah, there's all these, it's this these that abandonment that has happened, and there's all these places out there, and also how incredibly irresponsible, because there are these abandoned bases loaded with ordnance and weapons,
Oh,
like,
that's true.
just left hanging out on some island, or some planet.
Oh,
So
that's true. They didn't like bring in, yeah, they didn't exactly bring in their EOD to,
right,
take
clean it up,
care of the bombs that are still alive there.
blow it up. But hey, good, I guess good thing they
But I
didn't.
mean, the rebels are always on the run, and so I don't think they really want to keep abandoning, but they have to keep. And that's like the whole reason, like Snoke wants to have his whole empire be on the supremacy, on the ship. Like
Right.
that's why they don't have like a solid, place. Like the
Right.
Death Star was sort of that was a target because it is in one place.
Yep.
But the
Sweet.
supremacy was supposed to be different and it's supposed to be like its own little like mobile planet. Um, so I mean, the base life, it's rough.
Right.
Here,
Exactly.
something I really love about this scene is how like then we start seeing um we get the resistance march. We get doon doon doo doo doon and they start setting up their mobile equipment and it's like they're wiping off this dusty stuff. Like I guess like what if we found like old equipment here on Earth and like you think those old computers you just wipe that much dust off and they still like turn on and are
Wrap
function
it up.
like it's hilarious. But then they like have these mobile consoles. It's sort of like the Radis, but it's like their ship in a box.
Right. They're like, "Oh, open all the suitcases. Let's go." And like,
Yeah.
whoop, it's like opening up their laptops and everyone's getting plug it in.
But they're like really clunky. They're like
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
They're like those rugged laptops that like,
Yes. It's like those
military
hard
engineers.
drive covers, those
Yeah.
yeah, the
It's like we
LaCie,
found these old rugged heart, laptops
like an
from
OtterBox.
2009. OtterBox, there's a Palm Pilot there. Um, it all has that like, and it's funny because like it's the tracking of time through tech in Star Wars. It's a fool's errand, like you're not gonna like you can't do it. So, you know,
Yeah.
it you do they're able to visually say like, yeah, this is old stuff. It still works.
With the simple act of wiping the dust off.
Right. And like
Hmm.
da, 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 and then and it is and I guess all those things would work over time, but like, time is different in Star Wars. So
Yeah.
um, I get like, and you kind of have to let go about that.
Plus, I do notice that when I go to, I mean, I'm used to like laptops being able to do anything, but when you're using equipment for purely utility purposes, a lot of times that stuff is like proprietary and old and like good at doing its job, and it would not actually be useful to have like a new souped up like Mac or whatever
Right.
to do that.
Exactly.
Like
And
sometimes all you need it to do is be a cash register and do that
and,
thing. And
and
so it
that's
seems like it was ready to immediately start tracking and doing whatever software was on there.
right. You could still use a cash register from 40 years ago. Um, so I don't know. I mean, it was just like I think that there's, I do like how this whole, standoff plays out. Um, there is that feeling of dread and like, and you're another thing too, I think is good, when we talk about abandonment, um, there is also that, feeling of just you're alone, right? And like I think Ryan Johnson did a great job with this throughout this whole movie of creating that desperation. And the numbers are dwindling, and here you are now, you're like in this sweeping space. I mean, I'm gonna jump ahead, but like when um the handsome long-haired old man, I forget his name, comes out and stands, and he's waiting for it, like there's just that.
Amazing. It's quiet.
Yeah.
There's quiet there.
And it's so good how that like that feels. And then and then bringing that all home, you then have Poe and his, you talk about voices. He's not the same as, he doesn't have the gravitas that Kylo Ren has. But Poe's voice is like, you know, Poe's doing a Bugs Bunny impersonation. Oscar Isaacs has got the same. It's almost like, this is a space guy from Brooklyn. He's got the, same way like Dexter Jetster has that, like, hey, what's going on? Poe has that feel. And as a New Yorker, you hear his, whenever he's excited and he's like, hey, like he sounds like a guy that I know, and like there's just and for me, I just, I like that about his character, um, and how he played it. And, and I think that there's just you know, there's a franticness to him, but like, I just like that his voice, it has such a Bugs Bunny feel to me where like, he's a wise ass, and he's a punk. And I think that like he comes and he pulls that off really nicely. And especially this is the scene where he's kind of, at this point, like, he's transitioning from, you know, the wise ass into the leader, and so
Yeah,
I think
this is
he's
the line where because am, I'm not a Poe fan
mhm,
from in this movie until this scene,
right,
and it's when he is able to step up and be that person to be like, hold your fire, and he has the command. He's even though he kind of got in trouble earlier and kind of got shown a little bit, he didn't shirk from his, like, he was still able to step up and be a leader. I think that's unique. I think when that happens to me, if I'm like in the doghouse, I sort of maybe feel like I'm not going to speak up after that until I get more comfortable. But he still has like his sense of what needs to be done. And in this case, like, hold your fire, don't shoot. He has the command. And then just, you know, the genuine, and then just he's so genuine. He's like, Finn, Rose, you're not dead. Where's my droid? And then like when he's like, buddy, I'm so glad to see you. And
my
he's just like,
guy,
oh my
hey,
God, it's so like, and BB-8 is so happy to see him. And it's like,
yeah,
that's when I'm like, okay, yes, we do need people like Poe. We do.
right,
And I
and
and
I
I
think
and I think the movie was showing that. It was
right,
showing you can't only have Poe types, but he still is like very valuable type of person to have on the team, and this is where it really comes together for me.
yeah, and I think I think his character, they didn't know what to do with him. Like I do like him in this movie, more so like than like I said, I like the three leads. I am very fond of. I think each one of them, or not the three, resistance leads. Um, you know, the thing that I really struggle with as a fan these days is like they didn't have a plan for these characters. They were kind of, and it was such a disservice. I mean, I'm not going to litigate, all the stuff that the internet's been done a fine and horrible job of going through. Oop, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Sorry. Um, my next meeting's coming up. But there's this feeling of, um, you know, even though that they're lost, I think these actors are good enough to where they're able to bring in, there's some growth that happens with them. And I think, it kind of, when you think about their voice and how they react, and you think about their acting, if you listen to how, you know, they speak when, as they go on their hero's journey, these actors change their intonation, they change in their tones, and they change at how they speak with one another. Even though Poe will still come out like, "Hey, buddy, how are you, man?" And like, he'll still, now that he's kind of taken into that leadership role, you can hear the concern in his voice. You can hear where he feels the responsibility coming on. When Rey becomes Jedi Rey, there's this confidence, as opposed to when she's, trying to haggle on Carplot and she's like, more not sure of herself. Um, so I think that is there's a interesting
It's
way
a
that they,
stepping into leadership.
yeah, and a
And here
maturity too.
and here Finn has his moment too, where he's like, you know, no, well, they'll come. Like, they believe in Leia. He's sort of, Finn is the one to give the sort of the pump up speech
Right,
here. And that's nice to see. I mean, Rey gets her moment later when she lifts the rocks,
right. It's
but
just lifting rocks, man. um yeah, it's really interesting. It was great, like kind of coming back into this. It's funny because like I did, you know um over on Star Wars Minute, my minutes were early on there, so kind of coming back and revisiting here, talking with you about it was like, oh man, a lot's happened to these guys since then.
yeah. Well, before we wrap up, let me just say that the themes that we hear in these minutes are Kylo Ren. We also hear March of the Resistance, and we also hear Rose a few times. Do, 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 do. And that will come up throughout the crate sequences. Um, and Radke, I know that when you were on Star Wars Minute, and for the few people who don't know, Star Wars Minute is um, the original Star Wars but minute by minute podcast, and they go through the films 1 minute at a time, 5 days a week. And they were my inspiration for this podcast, going through the same 5 minutes, the same weeks. So I know that you were on the week with Hermit Luke,
Mhm.
and you said that was one of your favorite minutes in Star Wars, period, was him drinking milk from the seesaw. And I actually agree with you there.
Thank
And
you.
I know that you said there then that it was because of character development.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one of my favorite parts of the movie is that whole scene with, I call it Luke's music video. It's
Yep.
like the whole getting to see Luke do his thing on the island, character development.
It
I'm
is.
totally with you.
It's the equivalent to the training montage. It's just the opposite of training. It's him, like, I love when, like, that scene. I mean, the absurdity of it is also, what I think is terrific, but it really is one of those things where, um the way that he acts, and the way that, like, he's a crazy old man. He's Han Solo's description of Ben Kenobi, and that's what he's become. And it really flows nicely, and it kind of brings things around. He's the old hermit, and you know what? You don't get to see Ben Kenobi do weird stuff,
And I wish we did.
right?
That would have been so, yeah.
Like, I hope Ewan McGregor, there's a shot of him just
It's
picking
not
his
just
nose.
like weird, it's not just like weird stuff. It's also like really badass. Like he pole vaults like across cliffs. Like
Right.
he's doing like he just has this whole other side to him
Fearless
that we've never
insanity.
seen, and it's spectacular.
Yeah. And then he drinks fresh milk from a seaside. Like, well, I would love to, like, again, I may have said this on Star Wars Minute, but, like, just to be there when he's on the island being like, oh, I'm hungry, man, there's got to be a better way. Like, I've got an idea. Like, how desperate do you get before you are milking a seesaw? With that, I will leave you.
Yes. Where can people find you online, Radke?
Twitter's the best place. Radke327 on
I'll put all the
Twitter.
links in the show notes.
Yep, and go follow me, and we'll talk Star Wars and all sorts of things.
That sounds great. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in another week. We're almost done with The Last Jedi. And we're on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms if you want to look for Star Wars Music Minute. Until next week, thank you so much for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.